I wasn't planning on staying in the city this summer. My internship got canceled last minute, and my roommates all scattered, one to Europe, another to his hometown in Oregon, so I ended up back at my parents' condo for a few weeks. They were on a road trip up the coast, which meant I had the whole place to myself. Or at least, I thought I did. Until I met the neighbor. I'd seen her before, of course. She lived across the hall, maybe late 30s or early 40s, hard to tell. Long dark hair usually tied up, casual clothes that somehow still looked elegant, tank tops, linen pants, light cardigans. She had that kind of look that made you feel like she belonged in a slow movie. We'd nodded to each other in the hallway a few times, maybe exchanged a few polite smiles, but never talked. That changed on my third day home. I was coming back from a run, sweaty, tired, earbuds still in, when I saw her struggling to carry two heavy grocery bags up the stairs. One bag tipped, spilling a roll of paper towels and a few apples onto the landing. I pulled out one earbud. Need a hand. She looked up, surprised, then smiled. You must be the son. I blinked. Oh yeah? My parents are out of town. I figured, she said, brushing hair out of her face. You've got their smile. I didn't know what that meant, but I picked up the apples and took one of the bags from her. Her apartment was a mirror of ours, same layout, same kitchen island, but completely different in feeling. Where ours felt clean and impersonal, hers felt lived in. Warm lighting, faint scent of jasmine and wood, mismatched mugs drying near the sink. Plants hung near the window, and music played softly from a speaker, something mellow and jazzy. She set her bag down and turned to me. Thanks. I would have survived, but my ego appreciates the rescue. No problem, I said, wiping my forehead with my shirt sleeve. Water? Sure. She poured two glasses and handed me one without hesitation, like we were already familiar. I wasn't sure if I should linger, but she leaned against the counter and started asking questions. School, what I was studying, whether I remembered living here as a kid. Her voice had that low, steady rhythm that made you forget how long you'd been standing in one place. At one point, she paused and tilted her head. You've grown up a lot. I gave a half smile. Time tends to do that. She smiled back, but didn't reply. Just sipped her water and let the silence stretch for a beat longer than expected. I didn't stay long. Maybe 20 minutes total. But when I got back to my place, everything felt quieter. Like I'd stepped out of a different kind of world. One with soft music, slow smiles, and something I couldn't quite name hanging in the air. After that, I started noticing her more. Not in a creepy way, just noticing. The sound of her door closing. Her shadow behind the curtain as she watered plants in the morning. Once, I passed her in the hallway as she was carrying laundry, and she smiled in that same casual way, but her eyes stayed on mine for half a second longer. 2 days later, she knocked on my door. I'd just finished a late lunch, still in sweatpants, when I heard the knock. When I opened, she stood there holding a white extension cord. Do you guys happen to have a spare power strip? Mine's shorted, and I've got 3 things fighting for one outlet. Yeah, I said. Let me check the closet. I grabbed one and handed it to her, but she tilted her head. You mind plugging it in for me? That one's behind a bookshelf. I'm not in the mood to wrestle today. That's how I ended up in her apartment again. This time with my hands awkwardly reaching behind a tall piece of furniture, trying not to knock over her candle or her stack of art books. Careful, she said with a laugh behind me. That stack is structurally unstable. When I turned, she was sitting cross-legged on the floor, a loose blouse draped over one shoulder, light jeans, barefoot. She looked completely at ease. She leaned over to adjust the speaker wire near the wall, and the fabric of her blouse shifted. One of the top buttons had come undone, revealing the faint line of her collarbone. I tried not to notice, but I did. She caught my glance, just for a second. Didn't react, just gave a soft smile and said, You okay over there? I nodded too quickly. All set. I stayed a little longer. She offered me tea. We talked about music. She asked me if I still played guitar, said she thought she remembered hearing it through the wall years ago. I told her I'd stopped playing. That's a shame, she said. You should pick it up again. Some things are better with age. That made me pause, but she didn't elaborate. Eventually, I said I should go. She walked me to the door, and before I stepped out, she said, I'm usually around in the evenings. In case you get bored. Her tone was friendly, perfectly neighborly, but I felt the pull of something else under the surface. That night, I lay awake longer than usual, not just thinking about her. Thinking about how being around her made me feel different, like I was more aware of everything I said, how I moved, how I looked. I wasn't used to that, and I wasn't sure what to do with it. A couple of days passed without much happening. I'd hear her apartment door open and close. Once, I caught a glimpse of her heading down the stairs in athletic clothes, earbuds in, her hair pulled into a high ponytail. She nodded at me with a small smile as she passed, and I said hi, but nothing more. I told myself that was good, normal, keep it simple. But the more I tried not to think about it, the more I did. That Thursday evening, just as the sun was dipping low and the hallway filled with golden light, there was another knock at the door. I already knew who it was before I opened it. She was in a sleeveless cotton top, white, slightly sheer in the light, and a pair of high-waisted lounge pants. Barefoot again, she held a screwdriver and looked mildly annoyed in a way that felt almost staged. Okay, she said. This time I really do need help. One of the cabinet doors just came off its hinge. I didn't hesitate. Want me to take a look? She stepped back, motioning with the screwdriver. Please, before I throw the whole thing out the window. I followed her in. The apartment was dimmer than usual, lit mostly by the orange spill of light from the windows. A jazz record played softly in the background, something with slow piano chords and the occasional soft snare brush. The cabinet was in the kitchen. One of the doors tilted sideways, its hinge half loose and dangling like a dislocated joint. It's not too bad, I said, crouching down. Just needs a tighter anchor. Got a few minutes. All the time in the world, she said, settling on one of the bar stools behind me. I focused on the hinge, carefully aligning it with the screw hole. But I could feel her behind me, not staring, just present, watching, breathing, calm. She poured 2 glasses of wine while I worked. Set one next to me without asking. What okay? She asked. Sure, I said, trying not to knock over the cabinet door. We didn't talk much as I worked, which only made the tension grow louder in my head. Once I finished, I stood to test the door, swinging it gently open and closed. Perfect, I said. Should hold now. She clapped once, slowly. Look at that. A man of many talents. I laughed, feeling the blush creep in. Just a screwdriver and good posture. She sipped her wine, her gaze soft but unflinching. Still, I appreciate it. I took a sip from the glass she gave me, leaning against the counter. The light in the room had dimmed just enough to feel more like evening now. The record kept playing. We stood like that for a while, me sipping slowly, her occasionally looking at her phone but never distracted. Then it happened. She reached up to adjust the strap of her blouse. It had slipped slightly off one shoulder, and one of the small buttons near the neckline came undone. Not dramatically, not like in a movie, just slipped open, revealing a bit more of the curve beneath the fabric. She didn't react. She glanced down at it, then casually began fixing the button, fingers working slowly. I don't know why I stared, but I did. Something about the slow movement of her fingers, the closeness of our bodies. The wine in my hand, it made the air feel denser. I was standing still, holding my breath without realizing it. And then she looked up, not fast, not surprised, just looked directly at me and said, "You're quiet all of a sudden." I froze. My throat went dry. My hand tightened slightly around the wine glass. I had no idea what expression was on my face, but hers didn't change. She wasn't smirking. She wasn't teasing. Just watching. I started, then stopped. She finished adjusting the blouse, buttoning it slowly, and took another sip from her glass. "It's okay," she said, softer now. "It's just interesting." I swallowed hard. "What is?" How quickly you went from charming and talkative to silent. Her voice was smooth, unhurried, the kind of voice you use when you know the other person isn't breathing quite right. I didn't mean to stare, I said quietly. She nodded. I didn't say you did. Another pause. Then she walked slowly around the island, setting her glass on the counter as she passed. I forget sometimes, she said, stopping near the window, how quiet this apartment can get. She stood there, arms crossed gently over her stomach, backlit by the fading orange outside. You ever notice that? How some silences feel heavier than others. I nodded. Yeah, I've noticed. Her eyes flicked to mine. This one feels like that. And then, just as calmly, she picked up a stack of mail from the windowsill and turned her back to me. Just like that, the moment passed. Or at least, it folded itself back into the ordinary. I stood there for another full minute before setting my glass down beside hers. I should probably head out, I said. She didn't turn around. Thanks for fixing the cabinet. Anytime. I walked toward the door, opened it, and paused in the frame. I wanted to say something, ask something, anything, but she didn't turn. So I stepped out and let the door close behind me, and stood in the hallway, heart pounding, staring at the closed door like it might open again. It didn't. I didn't see her for the next 3 days. Or maybe I just didn't let myself look. Whenever I heard movement in the hallway, I stayed still. If I passed her door on the way to the elevator, I didn't glance at the handle. I tried to convince myself that the moment in her kitchen had been nothing. A slip, a coincidence, an overreaction on my part. But I couldn't shake it. The way she looked at me when she said I was quiet. The way she didn't laugh or brush it off. The way she didn't apologize. And the way I hadn't wanted her to. On the 4th night, I ran into her outside. Literally. I was coming back from a late walk, headphones in, hoodie pulled up, when I turned the corner and nearly collided with her. She had a bag of recycling in one hand, her keys in the other, and her hair pulled into a loose bun. No makeup, just a gray tee and those same loose lounge pants. She froze when she saw me, and for a second, neither of us moved. Then she smiled. Softly. Hey. Hey. I echoed, pulling one earbud out. You disappeared, she said lightly. I shrugged. Just been around. She didn't press. Instead, she unlocked her door and stepped halfway inside before turning to look back at me. You want to come in for a bit? I made too much tea. It was such a simple invitation. No pause. No hesitation. And I couldn't say no. Her apartment looked the same, but it felt different now. Warmer somehow. More personal. The lights were low, lamps, not ceiling fixtures. A soft instrumental playlist played in the background. The air smelled faintly of citrus and something floral. She handed me a mug and sat on the couch, legs tucked under her, cradling her own cup in both hands. I sat beside her, not too close, not far either. We talked. Slowly, carefully. She asked about my school again, if I was still thinking of switching majors. I asked about her work. Turns out she was a freelance editor for a few small publishers. We danced around deeper things, but the undertone was clear. We were both pretending we hadn't felt what we felt. At one point, I looked over at her and asked, "Why did you say that? That day? About me being quiet?" She didn't respond right away. Then she looked at me, her head tilted slightly. "Because you were. And it meant something." "What did it mean to you?" She took a slow sip of tea before answering. "It meant you noticed." My heartbeat ticked louder in my ears. "I did," I said quietly. She nodded. "I know." We sat like that, the space between us charged but undisturbed. Every so often, her knee would brush mine when she shifted. Each time, my whole body tensed slightly, waiting for more. She placed her mug down on the coffee table and leaned back into the couch. "You're easy to be around," she said, looking at the ceiling. "Most people talk just to fill space. You don't." I smiled faintly. "Maybe I just don't have that much to say." She turned her head toward me. "No, you say enough." We stayed like that for a while. Quiet. Present. Eventually, the playlist ended. The room felt still. And she broke the silence again. You know, this apartment used to feel huge. Too quiet. Especially at night. I glanced at her. Still does. She looked at me, her eyes soft. Less when you're here. My chest tightened. Something shifted in the air, subtle but irreversible. She sat up slowly, pulling her legs down and turning toward me. I mirrored her instinctively. We were facing each other now, knees almost touching. She reached out, not to grab or take, but just to rest her hand lightly on the space between us, close enough that I could choose to close the distance. But she didn't move further. I don't usually do this, she said. I don't either. I don't mean tea. I know. Her fingers brushed mine. Not fully. Not in a way that could be called a touch. Just a ghost of one. A question. I answered by turning my hand over. Her fingers slipped into mine. No kiss. No dramatic gesture. Just that, skin against skin. Warm. Honest. We sat there like that, holding hands like two people who knew the weight of silence better than they knew the sound of certainty. Her eyes didn't leave mine. I've been alone a long time, she whispered. I've been lost for a while, I replied. Another pause. Then she smiled. Not wide, just enough, and leaned her head gently against my shoulder. We stayed that way for what felt like an hour, or maybe a minute. I didn't know anymore. The world outside the window was still and quiet. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to be anywhere else. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because of an alarm. I hadn't set one. I just opened my eyes and knew the day would feel different. I didn't see her that morning. Didn't hear her door. The hallway was still, and the silence had returned. Only now, it wasn't heavy. It was expectant, like something had shifted, and the air hadn't caught up yet. I kept myself busy for most of the day. Cleaned my room. Ran errands I'd been putting off. But every quiet moment pulled me back to the night before, her fingers resting in mine, her head on my shoulder, the way neither of us had tried to define what that meant. I didn't text her, didn't knock. But that evening, just after the sun went down, I heard a knock on my door. 2 soft taps, then silence. When I opened it, she stood there in a long beige sweater that hung slightly off one shoulder, holding a folded blanket and a paperback novel. I was going to read on the couch, she said. Figured it might feel less weird if someone sat nearby. I stepped aside. Come in. She walked past me, casually, like we'd done this 100 times before. But neither of us sat. She looked around the room, then at me. You cleaned. I nodded. Didn't expect company, but yeah. We stood across from each other for a moment. She lowered the blanket onto the arm of the couch, but didn't reach for the book. Instead, she crossed her arms, more a gesture of nervousness than defiance. You didn't come by today, she said softly. I didn't know if I should. She nodded, biting the inside of her cheek for a second. Probably smart. I took a breath. But I wanted to. Her eyes met mine. I did too, she admitted. But I didn't know what that would mean. It doesn't have to mean anything. Not right away. I'm not afraid of what it means, she said, stepping a little closer. I'm afraid of what people assume it means. I understood. The difference in age. The hallway whispers. The judgments people made before they knew a thing about you. I don't care what they think, I said. Maybe you don't now. But later. I stepped toward her too. Later is a problem for later. Right now, it's just you and me. Same as last night. She gave a small, almost tired laugh. You make it sound simple. I shrugged. Maybe it is. Her gaze softened. She reached out and touched my arm, just above the elbow. Her hand lingered, warm through the fabric of my shirt. You're not what I expected when you moved in. Neither are you, I said. She looked down briefly, then back up. Do you want to sit down? Or are we just going to keep talking in circles? I gestured toward the couch. Ladies first. We sat side by side. The book remained untouched. The blanket too. For a while, we just talked. Not about us. About things outside the room. Her favorite places to visit. A small town she once lived in. A dog she almost adopted but didn't. I told her about my first apartment near campus and how it always smelled like burned toast no matter what I cooked. And somewhere in the middle of that quiet exchange, her hand found mine again. No theatrics, no hesitation. This time, when our shoulders touched, we didn't pull away. At one point, she turned her head and rested her temple against mine. "You're warm," she murmured. "So are you." A long pause. "Do you think we'll regret this?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "I think we'd regret not seeing where it goes." She nodded against my shoulder. Eventually, we reclined slightly, both leaning back. The night continued without interruptions. No phone calls, no knocks. The world respected the quiet we created. She fell asleep first. I watched her for a moment, her breathing calm, her fingers still loosely laced in mine. I didn't move, not because I was afraid of waking her, but because, for the first time in a long time, being still felt exactly right.